So how would you describe inferential reasoning? Do we want to take a stab at going first on that?
I guess I'll take a shot at it. One of the things I think about when I think about inferential reasoning is the process of inference to begin with, and really understanding kind of what's going into that. So the idea that you understand that the statistic you get from a sample is going to vary from the population values, and that you have to understand that variability if you want to make a generalization from something in a sample to something in a population, or from an experiment to the population in general.
Okay. All right. Anything you'd like to add to that?
I think Roger has said it well. I know for myself, in working with teachers and with students, I think their natural inclination is, when working with data, they just want to come up with one number that they use to describe the population. And for me, just helping students to realize that maybe either informally or formally, they need to take into account variability and move from descriptive statistics, descriptive models, to more inferential thinking.
I have teachers ask me a lot what inference is, and usually they're mathematics teachers who haven't thought about statistics. So I think the big new idea for them is that we take samples of data and try to say something about a wider population or all the data that we probably can't collect. But we never know for sure if that's the right statement. There's always some level of uncertainty, and that's new for them. That's a kind of a challenge for students and teachers. So.
Yeah. So thinking some about the statements that you all said, I hear that it involves data. So we're reasoning from data, but we're trying to generalize beyond that data, trying to make a statement beyond that data, and that there's uncertainty involved, and that the claims that we make, we recognize that there's a level of uncertainty in the claims that we're making. Good. So why is it important for our students to kind of engage in inference? Why should this be part of any curriculum that we do?
That's what our world's about now.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
our world is about being surrounded by data and trying to use data to make informed decisions. And it's just really critical that it becomes just sort of second nature to them, that when they're working with data and they think about this uncertainty, this variability component, which you can't just use descriptive statistics. You've got to be able to bring in that component when you're making generalizations. And there's lots of generalizations going on in our world right now.
Yeah, I'd like to build off what you were saying, that a lot of times students, their idea of the world, the perception of the world, are their own experiences, right? And so we develop as humans heuristics that don't help us necessarily make good judgments and decisions. And so we have a lot of data, but as everyday citizens, we may or may not use that data. We use our own experiences to kind of generate, unfortunately, biases. And so students need early on experiences with data that they can reason from to kind of challenge some of those heuristics before they really get set in and biases get set in. So it's critical that it starts early. You know, 6th grade, students should be looking at data that is relevant to them so that they can start thinking differently in different ways.
Yeah.
Because if you see your neighbor get in a car accident, now you have one case and they're going to extrapolate. It's just one case, right? But that's kind of their world. So that's why I think it's important.
Yeah, so I like how you were talking about early on. So what about the college level?
Yeah, that's one of the things at the university level. Even though students have seen data at, in the K-12 environment, and have been doing this since they were in 5th or 6th grade.
Hopefully.
They still don't fully grasp the idea of the variability of those summaries that they're looking at. They're getting these sample statistics, and they don't really, internalize the idea that yes, this is a value that could be very different if you were to have taken a different sample or conducted the experiment again.
Right. So experiences with repeated sampling might give them a better understanding about this presence of variability.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think is really important about teaching that, is to let them see that repeated sampling and the variability that comes from that.
So we know that any good statistical investigation starts with a good question. Right. So what kinds of questions can we pose if we were posing questions to our students that would engage them in opportunities to make claims from data and to engage in inferential reasoning? What are some of the types of questions we might ask them?
Do you want to start? Okay, yeah, I can start. So for middle school and high school students, I would say that if you can have data that they actually collect themselves, it's very powerful. So if you can have students doing some kind of activity and collecting data that they are generating, then they will understand where that data came from, they will understand the limitations, and it will really allow them to reason in a more robust way. Other types of questions, though, could be just about things that are relevant to them. So one activity we had was comparing Pixar's to DreamWorks, like which movie company is better or more popular, and they all know about Pixar's and DreamWorks, and so it was a good context for them to reason from. So I think that's important. Sometimes teachers will create questions that students are really not interested in, like does sleeping more hours mean you have higher grades, right? So we need to be careful of those teacher questions that they want to maybe show some relationship.
Because sometimes there's not a relationship.
Yeah, or they'll work hard to make sure it doesn't pan out, right? The students will kind of work against you sometimes. And the old like height versus foot length, I mean, some of those activities students have seen again and again and again. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to be careful.
Yeah. So engaging contexts that that kids really care about, so that they want to be able to make a claim.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and that they understand, one of the things you talked about was that they understand the sources of variability. Mm-hmm. You know, they're looking at that context and they know what's going on, and they can look at it and say, oh, part of what's happening there is the way you're measuring this, or part of what's happening there is, you know, the way that you've got one person doing this and the other person's doing that, so they can see those sources of variability hands-on. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think often if you can find examples that are connected to social media, or like Facebook, Twitter, cell phone usage, these are all topics that they're very interested in.
Right.
Sports, things of this sort. But you got to make it, you really do have to make it real world for their age,
right?
The time they are.
Right.
So that they understand it, and that they understand what's going on.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.